Hello everyone, welcome to this video. I've been making some mini tote bags and embellishing them with vintage buttons, and I wanted to share my process from start to finish. I'm actually selling these in my Etsy shop, but some people on Instagram mentioned interest in making one themselves, so I thought I would share a tutorial if maybe buying a button bag is not in your budget or you're just a crafty person who wants to try things out yourself. I try my best to only use materials that are second-hand, and all of these buttons that I'm using are vintage or thrifted. It's really easy to find bulk buttons on eBay and probably Etsy as well, although I think most of the ones that I've purchased are either from the Resource Exchange, eBay, or they're buttons that people have given me. Anyways, I'm not sure what kind of color story or design I'm gonna do yet, but I like to go through all of my stuff to get an idea of what I have, get an idea of what my options are. I've already made about 5 bags, and I was using this really nice cotton canvas that I got thrifting. I did run out of that, so today I'm going to be using a twill fabric that I also thrifted, and it's in a similar kind of neutral beige color. Well, the first fabric I used was kind of more orangey brown, but this one is a neutral beige. And it was quite wrinkled from being on my shelf for a while, so I decided to give it a good pressing before laying it out. I'm going to cut 2 long rectangles measuring about 11.5 by 25 inches. I actually already cut some out of linen that I'm going to use as templates, I guess. These are going to be the body of the bag and the lining of the bag. They're going to be the same size. And I cut a few extra out because I plan on making a bunch of these. For the straps of the bag, I'll cut 2 strips of fabric measuring 3 inches by 23 inches. These are the fabric pieces that I'll be using: 2 large rectangles for the bag and lining, and 2 strips of fabric for the handles. I'm going to fold this rectangle in half. Where the fold is, that's going to be the bottom of the bag. I'm going to pin the sides of the bag, and that's where we're going to sew. I used my presser foot to guide the seam. I just matched the edge of my fabric with my presser foot. I think that's about like 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit more, but you could also do 1/2 inch of a seam allowance and that'd be fine. Once both of the side seams are sewn, I'm going to make a little shape at the bottom of the bag by sewing a triangle. So I'm taking the corner of the seam, turning it into a little triangle with the seam down the center, and then I'm going to stitch along that triangle. I don't really have an exact measurement, but I used the plate, the silver plate on my sewing machine to be the measurement for me. So I lined up the tip of the triangle and tried to draw a straight line basically. And this is what will give the tote bag more dimension rather than just being like a flat rectangle. So now I'm just repeating that on the other side of the bottom of the bag. I'm going to turn this right side out so you can get a better idea of the shape that I just created with those triangles. It becomes much more of a tote rather than just 2 flat rectangles. I'm going to iron this, and then I'm also going to turn the top edge down about, I think about 1/4 inch, just to clean it up, and I am going to baste that down on the sewing machine. It'll be a bit of a top stitch. Ideally, I would have matching thread to the color of my fabric, but I did not have any, so I'm just using orange thread, which is kind of random, but it's okay. Moving on to the straps, I am just pressing them down to start, and then I am going to fold them in half the long way. I'm actually folding the wrong sides of the fabric together, and then I'm going to press that down so that there's a crease in the middle. Now I'm going to open up that strip of fabric that was folded and then fold both of the edges inside halfway, pressing them down. And now I'm going to fold it back down the middle. There are no raw edges anymore, and I'm going to sew down both sides of the strap. I'll repeat those steps for the second strap. I'm going to make the lining now in the same way that I made the body of the bag. I'm just not going to baste down the top edge of it when I'm done sewing the sides and the corners. This is how I'm going to leave the lining, and I'm going to put it off to the side for now. In the meantime, my next step is to sew the straps onto the bag. I'm going to use a ruler to make sure that they are the same distance from the edge of the bag. For this bag, I sewed rectangles where the straps meet the body of the bag, and I don't know necessarily why I chose to do it this way. Sometimes I sew X's where I want the strap to connect to the bag, sometimes just a straight line. It kind of depends on my mood, but I think the rectangles they're a very secure way to attach the straps. I wasn't really sure what kind of design I wanted to do. I really like doing stripes. I've done a lot of button flowers, something monochrome. I could do something with maybe just a couple colors, or maybe something totally multicolored. Sky really is the limit as far as deciding what kind of decoration you want to do, but I ended up going with this sort of multicolored red, black, and white, and some purpley buttons. And I'm gonna do flowers all over. Just a classic floral pattern button bag for this tutorial. Now that I know the design I want to do, I'm gonna set some of these button flowers off to the side and I can start sewing them down. For this part of the process, I have my little cutting tool as well as an embroidery needle, and I'm going to be using black embroidery floss to stitch the buttons down. I like using embroidery floss because it's like 6 strands of thread already built into one, so it's extra strong. Also, I do not really measure where I'm placing these buttons. To me, it's more like where I think they look good, where my eye wants them to go. I'm starting on the edge and then I'll work my way across. I kind of work in rows and then I try to space them out as best as I can. And then I'll tie off the thread after each flower. This is how much I did yesterday. So I'm almost done. I can definitely finish putting the buttons on the bag today. I'm going to keep sewing buttons, and then before I put the lining in, I'm going to pick a dome-shaped button to be the closure, and I'll show you how I make a braided loop to be the closure of the bag. I can show you on the one that I kept for myself. This is the bag that I've been carrying around. I kept it for myself because I got a little bit of oil paint on it. It's not very noticeable, but I still didn't want to put it in my shop if it's damaged like that. So once the bag is done being embellished and I put in the lining, this is how it's going to look when it's done. I put a little dome-shaped button and I made a little braid with the same shade of thread that I used to sew the buttons. And then this is gonna be the closure. So we'll get into all of that once I finish. The buttons shouldn't take too long. This is the little dome button that I'm going to use for the closure, and I'm going to sew this right in the middle of the straps on one side of the bag. Across from that dome button on the other side of the bag, I'm going to make a braid out of 3 strands of embroidery floss. First, I'm going to cut 3 pieces. I think I cut them at about like maybe 10 inches or so. And then I'm going to thread them on a needle, secure them in the place that I want them, and then I'm gonna start braiding them. And I just braided as much that would be the proper length to fit around the loop without having it be too tight or too loose. So I'm just checking that that works, and I'm going to tie a little knot to secure it, and then I'll sew the loop in place. Now I'm going to fit the lining back into the bag, matching the side seams. I'm going to use pins to pin the lining in place, and I'm going to tuck under that raw edge so that it's hidden and so that everything looks nice and clean. Once it's all pinned, I'm going to hand stitch the lining to the bag using more of that black embroidery floss. I like how it matches the thread used for the buttons, and it gives a bit of a cute detail of a whip stitch around the edge of the bag. That's pretty much the last step. I'm just tying off my thread and trying to hide it as best as I can in the lining. So yeah, that was the project, and I hope you liked seeing how I made the button tote bag. Let me know if you end up trying making this yourself. Send me a picture on Instagram. You know, I hope you're doing well out there, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye everyone.